He took out a loan in my name, vanished for months. Then his new fiancée called me begging for help. I wish I could say this story starts with something simple. A breakup. A bad argument. A slow drift apart. But no. Mine starts with a lie so thick it stained my credit, my peace, and a part of me I didn't know I could lose. His name was Dean. You know the type. Easy smile, always one story ahead of the truth. The kind of guy who knew every bartender by name and could charm the late fees off a utility bill. When we met, he was electric. Not just charming, but alive in a way that made you feel like the rest of the world had been sleeping until he entered the room. I was 26, working 2 jobs, trying to climb out of debt and maybe, just maybe, buy my own place someday. He was 30, handsome in a way that made people stare, with big ideas and no solid ground under his feet. But I didn't care. Not then. Because he made me laugh like no one had in years. And God, I wanted to believe someone like him could want someone like me. We moved in together fast. Too fast. 3 months in, my toothbrush was next to his, and he was cooking me breakfast shirtless like we were in a rom-com that never cut to the credits. It was month 6 when he asked me to help him with a small loan. Just to cover some startup stuff, he said, holding my hand like we were planning a future instead of stepping off a cliff. It'll be in your name, but I'll make every payment. You won't even notice. Every red flag in me rose up, and I buried them, because I loved him. Or maybe I loved what he made me feel, needed, seen, chosen. So I said yes. $12,500. That's what the papers said. A loan for a work van, equipment, tools, his big idea to start a mobile repair service. He signed nothing. I signed everything. The first missed payment came 2 months later. He said it was a mix-up. Then another. Then the calls started. Collections. Late notices. And just like that, Dean disappeared. No forwarding address. No goodbye. Just an empty closet, a canceled phone, and me staring at a loan I couldn't afford and a silence I didn't know how to fill. I cried for weeks. I screamed into pillows. I canceled nights out. I stopped answering questions like, "How's Dean?" I called his sister once. She told me he does this. He always disappears when things get hard. But nothing prepared me for what came next. 6 months after he vanished, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Something made me pick up. "Hi, is this Marley?" A soft voice asked. "You don't know me, but I'm engaged to Dean. And I think we need to talk." I sat down. My legs just buckled. "You're what?" "Engaged," she repeated like it didn't taste like acid in her mouth. "He said you were his cousin, that you helped him with some paperwork. But something doesn't add up. And he's in the hospital." My stomach turned. The words spun. Dean. Fiancé. Cousin. Hospital. "Why are you calling me?" I asked. And what she said next chilled me. "Because your name is on his insurance policy. And they won't let me make any decisions without you." That was the moment I knew. This story wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't respond right away. I just sat there on the edge of my bed. Phone pressed to my ear. Heart punching my ribs like it wanted out. Her voice, this woman I'd never met, kept talking soft and unsure. But the words just blurred together. Insurance. Hospital. Decision-making. Emergency contact. Dean had named me on his insurance paperwork. That part of the loan must have needed a beneficiary. Of course he picked me. I was his safety net before I ever became his escape plan. "Marley? Are you still there?" I snapped back. Yeah, I'm here. Just trying to process." She gave me an address to the hospital. It wasn't far. I told her I'd think about it and hung up before she could say more. Then I stared at the wall like it might offer some kind of answer. I hadn't heard Dean's name spoken out loud in half a year. And now here it was crashing through my quiet life like it had every right. I thought about ignoring it. About walking away. But something inside me twisted, some old reflex of care or pride, or maybe just unfinished business. I got in the car. The hospital was one of those shiny new buildings with too much glass and too little warmth. I walked past automatic doors and sanitized hallways until I found the nurse's station. "Dean Rutherford," I said. "I'm on his insurance." They looked me up and down like I might be another ex, which I guess I was. Then they gave me a room number. Room 408. I didn't knock. Just pushed the door open and walked in. And there he was. Dean unconscious, face pale against hospital white, a bruise blooming across his jaw, his left arm in a sling. Machines beeped around him like he was on life support, but he wasn't. Just drugged or asleep, or avoiding responsibility in the most dramatic way possible. And sitting in the chair next to him, the woman from the phone call. She stood when she saw me. Early 30s, caramel brown hair tied in a nervous bun. Eyes red like she'd been crying for hours. "I'm Jamie," she said. I just nodded. He got in a car accident last night," she said. "Lost control. DUI. Of course. They wouldn't tell me anything at first," she continued, fidgeting with the strap of her purse. "Then they said his emergency contact was Marley Hale. And when I asked who that was, he said you were family. But I found the loan paperwork. And some other things. I didn't know whether to laugh or scream. Why are you really calling me?" Her voice dropped. "I need you to authorize a medical procedure. Surgery. They need a legal next of kin or insurance signee. And I just want to understand what I'm part of." I looked at Dean. This man who wrecked my finances, ghosted me, lied about me. "You're part of a disaster," I said. "One he built with lies and charm and borrowed time." Jamie looked away. "Did he do this to you too?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. There was a silence. The kind that weighs. Then she asked, barely above a whisper, "Should I marry him?" That question hit harder than any bill collector ever could. And I knew right then. This wasn't just about Dean. It was about what we allowed, what we forgave, and what we finally walked away from. The nurse came in while Jamie and I stood there, thick with tension and unspoken regret. "We need a decision," she said, clipboard in hand. "Time sensitive. The surgery window closes in 2 hours." I nodded, motioned for the paperwork, and sat in the corner chair by the window. The sun outside was way too bright for a moment like this. Like the world had no idea what we were living through inside this sterile room. "You're really going to sign it?" Jamie asked, her voice breaking. I didn't look up. "I'm not doing it for him." Because the truth was, Dean being in that bed didn't undo the damage. It didn't erase the lies. And it sure as hell didn't make me forget the months I spent dodging debt collectors and waking up to panic attacks. But I wasn't a monster. And as much as I hated what he did to me, I couldn't be the reason someone died. Even him. When I handed the papers back, the nurse nodded and disappeared down the hall. Jamie sat back down beside Dean, staring at him like he might disappear again. I stayed by the window. My legs didn't want to carry me anywhere near that bed. "You said he told you I was his cousin?" I asked after a while. She nodded. "Yeah. He said you were helping him clean up some old financial stuff." I thought it was weird, but he made it sound normal. "He always did," I said. Jamie looked over at me, her eyes puffy, mascara smudged. "Did you love him?" I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. God help me, I did. I loved the version of him that existed in the stories he told me. She swallowed hard. "He proposed after 3 months. Said I was the only one who ever really saw him." My stomach twisted. "Yeah, he said that to me too." We sat in silence after that. 2 women in the same wreckage. Different chapters, same damn book. A few hours later, the surgeon came in, thanked me for authorizing the procedure, said things went smoothly. Dean would live. Great. Jamie left to get food or fresh air or maybe just some sanity. I stayed. I don't know why. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I wanted to say something while he couldn't interrupt. He woke up around midnight. Just barely. Groggy, slurred. I was sitting in the corner when he opened his eyes. "Marley." I stood. Walked to the side of his bed. "Hey there, stranger," I said, my voice flat. His eyes widened a little. "What are you doing here?" I raised an eyebrow. "You put me on your insurance, remember?" He winced. Not from pain. From the sudden realization that the truth had caught up. "Listen, I can explain." "Don't. Just don't." He closed his mouth. "You used me," I said. "You wrecked my credit, vanished, and left me to clean it up. And now you want me to sit here like a loyal little fallback?" He looked away. "Jamie knows," I added. "About everything." That got his attention. His head whipped back. "You told her?" "No. You did. When you wrote my name down and called me your cousin." When you got lazy. Sloppy. Typical Dean. He tried to speak again, but I cut him off. I signed the papers. You're welcome for still having a heartbeat. That's all you get from me. I stepped back, pulled my coat on. Wait, he croaked. Please. Marley, I never stopped. Don't say love. You don't get to ruin people and then call it love. I turned and walked out before he could finish. Jamie was in the hallway when I stepped out. She didn't ask questions. Just fell into step beside me as we walked out into the night. And for the first time in months I felt something like peace. Not justice. Not closure. But clarity. The storm was still behind us. But I wasn't standing in it anymore. The morning after I walked out of that hospital room, I blocked Dean's number. Jamie and I exchanged maybe 2 texts. One thank you, one I'm sorry. Then silence. I thought that was it. Chapter closed. Door locked. But Dean? He doesn't know how to disappear quietly. 2 weeks later I got a letter. Not an email, not a text. A physical letter. Cream envelope, his handwriting, postmarked from some rehab center 3 towns over. I stared at it for hours before opening it. My hands actually shook. Inside was 3 pages of his version of repentance. Words like mistake and rock bottom. And I was scared. He said he loved me. Said he missed me. Said Jamie left him. That didn't surprise me. A woman can only sit in fire for so long before she runs. He said he was changing. That the accident woke him up. That he wanted to make things right. I folded the letter, set it on my kitchen counter, and went back to my life. I didn't reply. A month passed. Then another. I was rebuilding. Slowly. Paying down the loan. My credit still looked like a car crash, but at least I was behind the wheel again. Then one afternoon, I got a call from a block number. Is this Marley Hale? Who's asking? My name is Leonard Strauss. I'm an attorney representing Mr. Dean Rutherford. I nearly laughed. He got a lawyer? What for? Mr. Rutherford has filed a motion for shared liability on the loan taken out under your name. He claims the funds were used jointly for a business that involved both parties. I stopped breathing. That's a lie, I said. He used my name and ran. That's not what he's claiming. We're preparing to subpoena financial records and communication logs to support our case. Our case? He used me. I have nothing to do with that loan except the signature he pressured me into. That will be for the court to decide. I hung up. For the next hour I sat in my kitchen, heart racing, hands trembling, staring at that same counter where his letter still sat. I should have burned it. This was war. He wasn't just trying to apologize. He was trying to drag me back in. Legally. Financially. Emotionally. I called a lawyer the next day. A real one. Cost me more than I wanted to admit. But I wasn't letting him rewrite the story. Not again. Can he actually win this? I asked, sitting across from a woman named Sheila who had sharp eyes and a sharper voice. She reviewed the documents I brought, including the loan paperwork. He never signed any of this, she said. Which is both your biggest weakness and your biggest defense. No court in their right mind would call this shared liability. But he might still try to bury you in legal fees. So what do? We fight. Weeks turned into months. Court filings, countermotions, bank statements combed through with a microscope. And then came discovery. That's when we found it. Emails Dean had sent to Jamie. Ones he never thought I'd see. In one of them, dated 2 weeks before his accident, he bragged about getting Marley to co-sign without blinking. Said he was set for a while. I stared at those words until they blurred. That was my proof. My lawyer submitted them. And the tide shifted. Dean went quiet. His lawyer withdrew. And just like that, the case dissolved. But the damage? It stayed. I was still thousands in debt. Still waking up at night, waiting for the next blow. One evening I went to Jamie's apartment. I hadn't seen her since that night in the hospital. She looked surprised when she opened the door. Marley? Are you okay? I nodded. Yeah, I need to ask you something. She let me in. Do you know why he picked us? She blinked. What do you mean? Why us? Why me then you? Why did he think he could do this? Jamie sat down across from me thinking. Because we gave him the benefit of the doubt, she said. Because we wanted to believe someone could be better. I swallowed hard. Never again, I whispered. Jamie nodded. Never again. A year passed. Not in a neat montage but in fragments. In paychecks that vanished before I could breathe. In letters from the bank with balances that mocked me. In silence from Dean. Blessed, poisonous silence. The lawsuit was gone. The legal threat dead. But the scar it left? That thing flared every time I heard a block number or saw his name still listed as emergency contact on some outdated file I forgot to update. I changed jobs. Moved apartments. Cleaned out my life like it was a room he'd haunted. But some ghosts aren't just in the walls. They're in your sleep. Your voice when you doubt yourself. Your posture when someone new looks too kind, too interested. So when I met Logan, I was careful. I told myself he was just a coworker. Just a friend. Then we had coffee. Then dinner. Then he sat with me on my old couch, hands gentle, voice low, and asked nothing from me except the truth. And I told him. Everything. He didn't flinch. Didn't run. Just said, that won't happen again. Not on my watch. I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to. Then last week I got an email from a collections agency. Subject line, new transfer of debt. My heart dropped. I clicked. It was Dean. Again. Same loan. Different strategy. He'd filed for bankruptcy, naming me as a co-debtor. They were trying to shift liability back onto me. Again. I lost it. Right there in my kitchen. I screamed. I threw my phone. I slid down the cabinets and sobbed like I was being broken open from the inside out. Logan found me like that 20 minutes later. He held me without asking questions. Just stayed with me through the panic. The next morning I called Sheila again. My lawyer. How is this even possible? I asked. How is he still doing this? She sounded tired. He can file whatever he wants. Doesn't mean it'll hold. But it means you have to fight again. I'm sorry. That night I pulled out a box from my closet. The one I'd kept sealed. The one with every piece of evidence. Emails. Loan docs. The letter Dean wrote from rehab. Jamie's note. Photos. My credit report from that first brutal month. I laid them out like a crime scene. Then I opened my laptop and started writing. Not a letter. Not a blog post. Something bigger. I wrote the whole damn story. Names changed. Faces blurred. But the bones were real. I wrote about manipulation. About charm that cuts like glass. About how women like me get caught in storms we didn't see coming because we were too busy loving someone who only saw us as a resource. I didn't write it for revenge. I wrote it because I couldn't breathe with it inside me anymore. 3 weeks later, an editor from a mid-size online magazine picked it up. It went live with the title, Collateral Damage. Loving a man who used me for credit and left me for dead. The response was overwhelming. Emails from strangers. Women. Men. People who saw themselves in the wreckage. People who thought they were alone. Who thanked me for naming something they couldn't even explain. One message stood out. It was from Jamie. She said she read the piece 3 times. Said it helped her forgive herself. Said she was going back to school to become a therapist for trauma survivors. I cried when I read that. Sometimes healing doesn't come from justice. Comes from solidarity. From the echo of someone saying, me too. I still check my credit score twice a week. Still have a lawyer on speed dial. Still flinch at blocked numbers. But now when I look in the mirror, I don't see the girl who signed a loan. I see the woman who survived it. And that feels like a kind of freedom Dean will never understand. You'd think the story ends there. You'd hope so. But people like Dean don't leave quietly. They retreat, they lick their wounds, and they wait. And one rainy Tuesday in April, I found out just how much quieter he'd gotten. Because he was watching me. It started with a message. Not from him. From Logan. Did you post this? He texted, followed by a screenshot of a Reddit thread. I opened it. There, under a throwaway account, someone had posted a long scathing comment under the magazine article I wrote. Accused me of lying. Of manipulating the story. Of exaggerating for clout. It was detailed. Too detailed. Mentioned dates I hadn't published. Phrased things only someone on the inside would know. Dean. I knew it instantly. He'd found a new mask, an anonymous keyboard. But it was him. Same cadence. Same narcissistic flair disguised as wounded intellect. How do you want to handle this? Logan asked. I didn't answer right away. Because in that moment something in me cracked. Not from fear. Not from shame. From clarity. He was still trying to control the narrative. Still trying to be the main character in a story he didn't write. I reported the account. Logged everything. Took screenshots. Sent them to Sheila. Then I wrote a follow-up piece. Not defensive. Not bitter. Just honest. When abusers fight back, what happens after you tell the truth? It wasn't angry. It was surgical. Precise. I explained how common it is for survivors of manipulation to be gaslit even after the relationship ends. How trauma doesn't stop with the breakup. How power doesn't always come with a punch. It comes with paperwork, guilt, and public shame. And then something unexpected happened. The magazine ran a feature. Not just my follow-up. They interviewed other survivors. Talked about coercive control, financial abuse, identity theft in relationships. It became a whole series. It sparked discussions in forums, in comment sections, in podcasts. It grew bigger than Dean. Bigger than me. He tried to silence me, and instead gave me a megaphone. A few months later I got a voicemail. From his number. I almost deleted it. But curiosity won. Hey Marley. I saw the article. And the comments. You made your point. I get it now. I was messed up. Still am maybe. But you didn't have to go nuclear. I lost everything. You win. There was a pause. I hope that makes you happy. I didn't respond. Because it never was about winning. It was about breathing again. I forwarded the voicemail to Sheila. For the record. Then I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, legs tucked under me, and watched the rain. I thought about all the women who'd messaged me. About Jamie. About the me I used to be. I whispered just for myself. We're not collateral anymore. Dean could rant in the shadows. But I was done hiding. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the victim of someone else's story. I felt like the author. The article series changed things. For me, for others. But not everyone was cheering. A few months after the last installment went live, I got an email from a podcast producer. True crime, but with a focus on psychological abuse. She wanted to feature my story. I hesitated. A public platform meant more eyes. More support. But also more Dean. Still I said yes. Recording day came. I sat in a small studio with headphones that smelled like nerves and coffee. The host was kind. Empathetic. Let me tell it in my own words. No interruptions. No dramatics. At the end she asked, what would you say to him now if you could? I paused. Then I said, I'd say thank you. For teaching me what I'll never allow again. The episode aired 2 weeks later. It went viral. People reached out from everywhere: Brazil, Canada, the UK. Men and women. Teenagers. Grandparents. Abuse doesn't care about age or geography. But someone else reached out too. Jamie. Again. This time it was a video message. She sat in what looked like a therapist's office, her hair shorter, her eyes steadier. I listened, she said. I cried. I didn't realize how deep it went for you. For both of us. I'm sorry. Not for leaving him. For not staying in touch. She said she was interning at a women's shelter. Said she read every article I wrote. Listened to every word. I think you saved me more than once, she said. And I wanted to show you something. She lifted her wrist to the camera. A small tattoo. Just 2 words, inked in delicate script. Never again. I cried for a long time after that. It wasn't about the ink. It was about the bond. The invisible thread between people who survived the same fire and didn't let it turn them to ash. After that I started speaking. Not just podcasts. Panels. Workshops. I stood in community centers and libraries and Zoom rooms with 20 faces staring back at me. I told my story until it stopped shaking in my throat. And every time I saw someone's eyes widen in recognition, I knew. This wasn't just catharsis. It was a chain breaking. One afternoon after a talk at a college campus, a girl about 19 came up to me. Pale hoodie, chipped nail polish, voice like glass. He says I'm crazy. For checking his phone. For asking questions. Am I? I looked her in the eye. No. You're trying to survive. She nodded. Didn't cry. Just nodded. Dean still existed. Out there somewhere. Maybe trying to sell a new version of himself to someone new. But it didn't haunt me like before. Because I'd reclaimed every piece of my life he tried to steal. And I was using it. Not as a weapon. But as a torch. To light the way for others still walking through the dark. Last winter I stood in front of a packed auditorium. Rows of students, faculty, parents. It was a conference on financial literacy and emotional resilience. Two things I wish were taught together more often. I told my story again. Not just the heartbreak but the paperwork. The legal loopholes. The psychological traps. When I stepped off stage, a professor shook my hand. That was more than a speech, she said. It was a warning label for every young person in this room. Later in the green room I opened my inbox. One message stood out. Subject: closure. It was from Dean. I stared at it for a long time before clicking. I won't bother you again, it read. But I want you to know I read everything. I watched the talks. I saw the comments. I understand now. What I did wasn't just selfish. It was violence even without fists. I'm sorry. Truly. There was no plea. No manipulation. Just silence on the page. I didn't reply. Because closure, real closure, doesn't come in a message. Comes when you realize you no longer need one. Months passed. Spring came. Logan and I moved into a small house with creaky floors and a backyard that smells like lilac in the morning. He proposed in April. I said yes. But not before I told him. There are parts of me that still look over my shoulder. Parts that still flinch. He nodded. Then we walked slower. Together. Jamie was at the wedding. Front row. She wore yellow and cried during the vows. Afterward, she hugged me and whispered, "We made it. We did. Not because Dean changed, but because we did. Because we refused to stay broken. Because we learned that healing is messy, nonlinear, and sometimes quiet. But it happens. And one day you wake up beside someone who knows your past, respects your scars, and chooses you anyway. And suddenly the story isn't about survival anymore. It's about living. Free. Loved. Whole. We went to Italy for our honeymoon. Logan had never been. I had, once back in college, broke, sleep-deprived, and living off train station sandwiches. This time it was different. This time it felt like living inside a movie I used to watch from the outside. We stayed in a small villa in Tuscany. No itinerary. Just wine, sun, and quiet. The kind of quiet I hadn't known in years. The kind not just outside your body but inside it too. On the third morning I woke early. Logan still asleep, mouth slightly open, one hand curled near his chin like a boy dreaming. I padded barefoot to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stepped onto the balcony. The hills rolled out in front of me. Olive trees in slow motion. Air like silk. And I cried. Not because I was sad. Because I wasn't. Because I never thought I'd make it here. Because a part of me had believed for too long that survival was all I deserved. That being free of Dean was the finish line. But I was wrong. Freedom wasn't the end. It was the beginning. Later, over breakfast, Logan reached across the table and took my hand. "You're glowing," he said. I laughed. "That's just the olive oil." He shook his head. "No, it's something else." I smiled. Because he was right. When we flew home, the first letter waiting in the mailbox was from the Department of Consumer Affairs. One of the readers from the article series had pushed for a proposal. A new law requiring financial abuse education in credit applications. They wanted me to speak. I said yes. Because now my voice wasn't just for me. It was for every Marley out there who thinks they're alone. For every Jamie who thinks shame means silence. For every version of myself I left behind on the road to healing. And one day, I'll tell my story to my daughter. Or my son. Or the stranger sitting across from me on a flight. And I'll say this. You are not the worst thing someone did to you. You are the story you chose to write after. And mine? Still going. But now I write it with the pen in my own hand. No edits. No apologies. Just truth. It's been 3 years since the loan. 3 years since the day I signed a piece of paper with love in my chest and a stranger at my side. And now I don't flinch at phone calls. I don't scan my credit score like it's a crime scene. I don't mistake intensity for intimacy anymore. I've learned to listen to the silences between words, to trust the unease in my gut, to never sign anything out of guilt, hope, or fear. And maybe that's the gift in all of it. Not just survival, but transformation. I didn't just walk away from Dean. I walked into myself. I've spoken on 10 panels, been invited to contribute to a financial abuse curriculum that's now being piloted in 2 states. Helped pass a small, quiet law about cosigner protections. It won't undo what happened to me, but maybe it'll stop it from happening to someone else. Logan and I adopted a dog. Her name is Wren. She sleeps with her head on my feet and growls in her dreams like she's fighting off monsters too. Some days I still feel the old fear. A shadow in the room. A voice whispering that maybe I overreacted. That maybe I invited it. But then I remember. Abusers don't need help from their victims to ruin lives. They just need silence. And I broke that. I broke it loud. If you're listening to this and you've been where I was, trapped, unsure, ashamed, I want you to know something. You're not crazy. You're not weak. You're not alone. You are the story you choose to write next. And if no one ever told you, you deserve to be safe. You deserve to be believed. You deserve to come home to yourself. Every single day. That's what I do now. I come home. To a life I built. To love I chose. To a future that belongs only to me. And that finally is enough.